Yo, what is up? Max here, and I'm going to show you why you need to play Final Fantasy IX right now. I played Final Fantasy IX recently, and even though it's not my favourite game in the series, I realised it's probably the most well-rounded Final Fantasy. It's not like its PS1 predecessors where fantasy was starting to move out more and more, and sci-fi was becoming the more prominent design choice. Nope. This one is a step back to the days when Final Fantasy was almost entirely fantasy based. Back to the days with a medieval theme, royal bloodlines, knights, thieves, and all that good stuff. Even the character design is an ode to the Final Fantasy games of the past. Vivi looking like an OG black mage, or Garnet's introduction dressed as the classic white mage. And with those, it's pretty clear that this game is a love letter to the now forgotten 2D era of Final Fantasy. But because of the unfortunate timing of its release, it seemed like this was doomed to be forgotten too. See, when Final Fantasy IX, a PS1 game, hit the shelves in mid-2000, the PS2 was already out for a number of months, and Final Fantasy was just the last gen game. On top of that, Final Fantasy VIII had only been out in Europe for less than a year, or maybe the art style was a little polarizing for some fans of the earlier PS1 game, as well as hints of Final Fantasy X being just around the corner. I can't really say why it didn't get the attention that it deserved for years to come, but I can be glad that it's being recognized now, as we see it claiming top spots in the best Final Fantasy games lists all over the internet. So Final Fantasy IX steps back to the roots of the series, and it's not just for eye candy. It steps back with its equipment and inventory system, trading extra systems like materia, junctioning, or jobs for designated roles, meaning that one character will excel in one area of the combat aspect of the game. You might think that this would make combat dull and boring, but there's more thought involved in it than it would seem on the surface. It forces you to adjust the dynamic of the party and makes every choice in the battle menu more important. Now, there are adjustments you can make to your party in order to swing the battle in your favour, and that's abilities. Abilities are learned through earning AP, which you gain for beating enemies. These abilities need to be learned from weapons and equipment, and you're limited to a number of abilities you can equip based on your level, so you have to choose carefully. All the battle and abilities talk aside, it's time to talk about the story. I'm gonna try to remain spoiler free for this, so if you haven't played yet, you don't need to worry. Final Fantasy IX starts off with a pretty wacky plot where a group of thieves masquerading as a theatre troupe infiltrate the castle of Alexandria in order to kidnap the princess. It kinda sets the tone right off the bat, and that's that the game is different. It's almost comical at times, and it eases you into the story with a little bit of lightheartedness. But as you progress, it drip feeds you a more sinister plot, bit by bit, until all of a sudden you're just sitting there wondering how it got so dark after being so inviting and cute. But that's what this game does. It distracts you with its friendly characters and its jokey subplots to disarm you, and then it just drops a bomb on you with some seriously dark subject matter. You probably think that this is a little jarring, but it's not. It's so well paced, and the highs contrast the lows so well that you can't help but want to know what's coming next. Like I said, I'm not going to get into spoiler territory here and ruin the story for first timers, so as safely as possible, I'm just going to pick out a few of my favourite moments and areas that appear relatively early in the game. So the first area that sticks out to me is the Evil Forest. Their first area with encounters. Its dark appearance makes it very obvious that there is danger here, and it contrasts nicely against the previous palette of Alexandria. And even though it's dark in colour and it feels mysterious, there's still a good amount of colour with a nice mixture of cool and warm greens over the otherwise mostly black backdrops. The next place I want to talk about is Clara. Clara is a treetop village, and it does not disappoint one bit. It's picturesque, charming, and it really shows off the variety of areas in this game, from its desolate sandy base all the way to its lush green treetop with the decorative Celtic style architecture that I could honestly look at for hours. I have to say, it really is beautifully crafted. Clara is definitely one of my favourite areas to be, and it shows us one of the coolest cutscenes in the game. If I go much further than this, I'm gonna end up going into massive spoilers, but I absolutely had to mention Conde Petty. which is a village built on a bridge, and it goes for a more muted palette. The art style gives us the impression that the village has been around for a long time, and it's very set in its rich history and traditions of its people. I just wanted to take a moment to say that the accents the villagers have, a charming Scots-like accent, really emphasizes the overall variety in the game. So this brings us to our motley crew of protagonists, each with their own motivations, personalities and appearances. I'm not going to go through all of them just because I don't want to keep you here for hours, so I'll just go through a few of the outliers. Take Zidane for example. On the surface, he seems like a pretty happy-go-lucky guy that doesn't take many things very seriously. But as we get to know him more and more, he becomes a more complex character that will do anything he can to help those around him. He uses his cheekiness as a front to hide his deep loneliness, and despite his enthusiasm of helping everybody else, he's reluctant to ask for help himself. Vivi is small, cute, and radiates a childlike innocence, but despite his shyness and hesitations, he's an incredibly powerful mage. As the story progresses, we found out that he has a lot going on in his head and questions his very existence. He seems to draw people in and make friends very easily, even though he can be very awkward, and as we spend time with him, we see him gain confidence in himself. We meet Garnet as a princess, and you can see that in every aspect of her character. As she spends more time outside the castle and after a few lessons from Zidane, she learns to stand on her own 2 feet. She's determined, strong-willed, and is deep down a good person with strong morals. She has no problem putting people in their place and strives to do what is right, even if it costs her everything. Steiner is Garnet's royal guard and can come across oafish and condescending towards people outside of the castle. He has sworn an oath to protect Garnet at all costs and often hinders or gets on her nerves trying to do so. He can be very hard-headed and sometimes refuses to see the obvious. Nonetheless, he is a fierce knight and will see his duty through no matter what. Since we're talking about characters, I just felt like this little bit belongs here as it applies to characters throughout the game. So another thing that really stands out to me are the real-world topics it deals with as the story goes on. It deals with racism, appearance, loneliness, depression, and it really hits us with problems that many of us face in our day-to-day life. The game is almost 25 years old. How can it still be so relevant? Now, I can't talk about a Final Fantasy game without talking about the music, and I'm going to jump into the lore a little bit on this one. Nobuo Uematsu was sick and uninspired trying to write the music for this game. Square sent him a trip to Europe to soak in some of the European sights and sounds, and when he came back, he carefully crafted this soundtrack, and well, you can hear the European flavours he added to it. It just screams medieval Europe, from flamenco guitars to haunting piano melodies. He truly is the king of Final Fantasy music. Final Fantasy IX may be a representative of an era in gaming that has gone by, but maybe that's what we need as gamers right now. A step back from the realistic graphics, a look into the past when games were fully realised and carefully crafted. Final Fantasy IX is an absolute masterclass in video game design, and it wouldn't be a stretch to say it's one of my top 10 games of all time. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can catch me streaming on Sundays over at twitch.tv/maxweaponage. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.